So I wanted to float around and walk around, but I realized that I can't do that and run through the slides. So I guess I'll just have to do the hardest thing for me to do, which is to stay stationary.
There's no pause.
You know, it's interesting. I want to start with a story too. Last night, I was just flying from Hartford, Connecticut, and I was unable to land in the National Airport around 7 or 8. Got rerouted to Chicago, rerouted to Cincinnati, then rerouted to Chicago. It was a complete mess. And I called Michelle last night at 11:30 p.m. and I said, I'm not coming. I can't do it. I'm stuck in Chicago. I don't know what time I'm going to arrive. I'm not going to do it. And then I thought, wait a minute. I'm talking loud enough. You can't hear. I like the pace. You can all hear me?
Microphone, please.
No? Okay. Then I'll say
Just take a mic with you from the chairs.
There, how's that?
Awesome.
I said, no, I am going to go. And I thought, why am I going to go? I'm going to go not because I'm Brit, not only because I care about the planet. Of course I do. That's not really what was driving me to come. The Arctic, whatever's going on in the Arctic, it'll last another day, whether I show up here or not. The reason I decided to come is because I was driven out of respect for my profession, from my passion for the cause, my friendship with Michelle, and my commitment to keeping commitments. And I thought that in and of itself is a case in point of what we call humanistic communication strategies for climate change, which begins with a core thesis, which is stop asking what you can do for climate change and start asking what addressing climate change can do for you. It's a flip, and it's more than a rhetorical flip. It's a methodological flip. It's a structural flip. It's a rethinking of what we mean when we say climate change and what it really means to create the kinds of partnerships and research and governance down to the local level, which we were just speaking about in the previous session. What it really means to do that. It's very easy and much too facile to say, well, we're going to call for new modalities of governance. We're going to call for research into new modalities of governance that can help us achieve our targets, help us put it on the pathways to where we know we need to go. And again and again and again, until very recently, communications was not considered an integral part of that bridge building. Communications, until very recently, was always considered what we call in the profession a downstream activity. What that means, very simply, is you figure out what the science is and you rely on people like me to figure out a way to communicate it. And what we call that, I grew up in the backwoods of Maine, we call that putting lipstick on a pig. Right? Because at the end of the day, the data can only take you so far. So in the middle of this sort of questioning, do I go, do I not go, do I call it off? Guess what? My database crashed. And the entire talk disappeared. This was within 15 minutes of talking to Michelle last night at midnight while standing in line in the airport in Chicago, wondering if I can catch, at best, a 5:45 a.m. flight to get here at 11:28, which is when I leave. So no speech, nothing but a wing and a prayer. What I said was okay. Lesson number 2, case in point of what I do. I'm a person. This has happened. How in the world, how do I move forward acknowledging that I am a person with limitation, I am a person with bias, I am a person with a reputation to keep, and I am a person who's a total mess right now, but has to act anyway. Right? So I am going to essentially put together an imperfect presentation. Right? And that's one of the first things that I will sort of hope to leave you with at the end of our discussion today, is that we may not achieve the perfect solution. And we maybe should stop thinking about achieving the perfect solution and instead focusing on developing pathways of participation with people at local, regional, national, and yes, global levels that put us on a path. And along the way, we might not achieve all of our targets, but along the way, if we do it in a multi-stakeholder fashion, facilitated by collaborative communication, along the way, we might well achieve a better world. So I want to have a little fun. My journey into this focus on new sort of structural frameworks for communication actually started, although I didn't know it until 10 years later, but actually started in 1998 when I was still at the Discovery Channel, where I worked on science programming for many years with Aretha Franklin. So I want to essentially start us off with a little lesson from Aretha Franklin. Now bear in mind, I'm very aware of my context. This is a climate science communication environment and talk. And so I invite you all to listen. And I feel it's worth 4 minutes. Nothing else to hear Aretha. All right? But please bear in mind, there's a little bit of backstory here that connects to communication. And it's this. 20 minutes before the 1998 Grammy Awards, Luciano Pavarotti was on his way to sing and be featured. The doctor calls him up and says, you're not going. He calls up the producer, Luciano Pavarotti's not. What do you mean he's not going? We're on the air in 45 minutes. He's my lead act. What are we going to do? So all of the producers consorted with the music experts, and there's, in the German lexicon of opera, there's something called facts. F-A-C-H-S. The similarity is obviously intended. Facts. And what facts do in opera, it's a way of measuring, it's a system of metrics that allow producers and experts to essentially measure the efficacy, quality, and resonance of an opera singer's voice to determine whether they are appropriate for the operatic language. Aretha Franklin failed on all counts, okay? Every one of them. Producers said, no, you can't have Aretha. Aretha says, I'll do it. Well, do you sing Italian? No, I don't speak Italian. So do you know opera? I've never even sat in on an opera. Right? Do you know the verse? Do you know the song? No, never heard of it. Right? Just give me 12 minutes, give me a teleprompter, and let me do this my way. F your metrics. And I'll leave the allegory of that to your imagination.
Unfortunately, tonight his doctors have advised him to give that sore throat a rest. The selection he was going to perform was Destin Dormer. 2 nights ago, Music Cares, another legendary voice, performed that same song, one you might not expect. She's agreed to step in for a friend Luciano, literally at a moment's notice. Ladies and gentlemen, Aretha Franklin.
Go on the journey, then we'll get into the rest. According to the facts, Aretha couldn't hit that high note. What Aretha Franklin did is essentially take and transpose and translate an archaic, unrelatable, in this case, form of art, which the science connected to that art had determined she was incapable of performing against, and she turned it into that. Ladies and gentlemen, if we don't do that for climate science, we will fail. There is no way we achieve our objectives if we do not put ourselves in the position to generate the kind of passion towards the pathways that we have conference after conference after conference after conference insisting we need. And that requires a new way of thinking. And that requires that scientists step out of that language and begin to develop partnerships with those who can do this kind of transposition so that practitioners at the local level can do what they do best, which is actually accomplish this thing. The facts of opera. That performance of Aretha Franklin's set into motion a franchise across the United States and now globally, where opera is among the most studied, opera curriculums are the most studied forms of music and music education worldwide. Again and again and again, credited to Aretha Franklin. Why? Because she made it yours, mine, and ours. And it's our responsibility, if not imperative, to do the same with climate. To go back, New York Times article, 7 years after their performance. Home in the Range, who can sing what? Who can sing what? Climate versus climate blood. This was after the 350.org marches. This is the Huffington Post, acknowledging that across the board after the 350.org marches, biggest climate march in history, right? All of the coverage without exception, even on the Huffington Post, was about what the number means. What is this number again? And wait a minute, how many people really were there at that march? Okay? All of the fights were about how many people really were there. Okay? Because we're seeking to build in our communication efforts a coalition around an idea. So what I am in the process of working on with universities and media organizations and science organizations like the IPCC around the world is putting new frameworks and communication strategies in place to hopefully duplicate what I very proudly call the Aretha effect. to essentially move from data to partnership to celebration to that. Yes, the Ujima references that. And one of the pathways to accomplishing that is a new form of communications, which we call humanistic communications, which is being spearheaded by Yale University, the program that I run, the Science Communications Network with Impact program, which is a partnership right now among 15 universities worldwide, including Beijing, Sao Paulo, Imperial College, London, Yale University, and Arctic University to start. We intend over the course of the next 3 to 5 years to build it into a 167 university alliance. And everyone says, why 167? I have no idea what that number is. Traditionally to date, we really have only had available to us 2 communication models. The information deficit model, which is what I practice at the Discovery Channel and elsewhere for many years. And what we're all practicing, which is a very simple model. Give people the facts, and they'll make their decisions. Communicate the facts. On contrast to that is the information circuit model. The information circuit model is give them less facts. Give them as few facts as possible, and make it as dramatic and exciting as possible, and hope that we can influence them. Information deficit is focused on information. Information circuit is focused on influence. IPCC is your classic information deficit model. Discovery Channel, CNN, and Hollywood is your classic information circuit model. So we're caught between these 2 poles. And in the information deficit model, we say, okay, it's what all of us talk about all the time, which is, okay, so we've got the science, let's make it interesting. Let's make it primary. Let's do charts in primary colors, and let's make it simpler, and let's make it sexier, and let's do whatever we've got to do to have people comprehend it. This is considered, by the way, a good example of that. I allow you to be the judge of how good that is. This is an example of taking the information deficit model, what I call lipstick on a pig strategy. This is another example, and this is from a school curriculum. Daddy, I want a bike. Oh, good. You should drive your bike. That'll be good for the environment. Last slide. Woo, this is fun. I'm going to be safe, and boy, do I feel good about helping out with the environment. So the challenge, do we have it in us to elicit that reaction with an IPCC report? Our strategies today toward that end is to focus, and a lot of studies and work went into this, and I was part of that work, is let's focus on the fact that there's so much scientific consensus. And let's focus on the fact that there is, the science is uncertain, but the certainty is increasing. That's what's going to be the strategy. That has been the strategy. 2001, IPCC. There was a minority of opinions which we have not been able to accommodate, but a high degree of consensus. Marginalizing those who don't agree with the consensus. 2013, there was an overwhelming global consensus, and here's an example of the imperfection. This is not Ward, this is in 1990. High degree of consensus among authors and reviewers. 2007, yet again, an attempt to communicate the facts of consensus. Look how much we all agree. I did charts like this, test miserably. We did polls like this. Look how much scientific consensus there is, ladies and gentlemen. And look yet how little we know. We've got to change that around. And we developed memes, making fun of the other side because they had the last laugh, because they were basically convincing us all that there wasn't scientific consensus, and there was. And the bottom line is, nobody cared whether there was consensus or not. Our entire strategy was based on essentially convincing people that on the basis of scientific authority and consensus, it was worth them betting the farm and betting their vision, on investing in climate science, and the solutions. Information surfaced on the other side, just to briefly review. As I say, don't talk the facts, classic example. But what you have there, when you are not terribly interested in the facts, but you still want to influence people, is you're vacillating between doomsday scenarios or fantasy scenarios of a green future, like the Wizard of Oz, where we're all going to trot off to a happy future. God knows how we're going to get there. The results speak for themselves. Even in the latest Gallup poll, 2015, climate change is at the bottom of those considerations upon which people say that they would commit their vote for an elected official. Will the world act if we have more science information? What we're up against, take a deep breath, everybody. The answer is when you put the weapons of data against this, you're in real trouble. You're in real trouble. Because what we're fighting, ladies and gentlemen, is belief. And just like you can't talk someone out of Santa Claus until they're ready, and you can't talk kids out of the Easter Bunny until their peers basically support them in not believing anymore in the Easter Bunny, and it's less cool to believe in the Easter Bunny than not believe in the Easter Bunny, until that happens, we're going to still believe in Easter Bunnies and Santa Claus. And our weapons against this belief are these mantras based on the fact. This was a survey done with 20,000 pieces of literature on climate change, which were intended to engage the public. These were the 15 most common words found repeated most often in the climate literature. You try making matches and dates based on all those R words. It's a non-starter. So we like to make fun. I like to make fun. I photographed this in Mozambique. I don't believe in global warming with the attitude, well, good luck with that. All right? But actually, ladies and gentlemen, we could use a little more belief in global warming. We could use a little more we could use a little less marginalizing of the quote-unquote idiots who don't believe in global warming. And we could use a little more transposition from the 1960s and 70s Earthrise model, which allegedly established all kinds of awe about the planet and committed ourselves to an environmental path. It did that, but it is not helpful for the environmental process. And so what we're talking about is essentially transposing images of the planet, which are neutral of people's influence, and moving it into this. And the second image, ladies and gentlemen, is not just which focus groups measures very, very well, but it doesn't measure well simply because you're putting a face on a phenomenon. That's the key. What we've often done when we think about new models of communication is, okay, well, just make it personal. Just put people, pretty people, poor people, underprivileged, just put them in the front and let people relate. Guess what? People don't care that much about people. Right? So why does this image test well? It took a year to deconstruct that. You know what he came to? Because people can step into the story. Does that little dog know he's being rescued? Did the boy go back for that dog? Would I go back for my dog? This was in the middle of a typhoon in the Philippines. And the connection between that experience, supported by those values, and the fact that there is, however uncertain, increasing connections between the intensity and frequency of typhoons, means that is going to continue to happen. And when you start investing in stories that people can jump into, like Mary Poppins' Chalk Sidewalk, right? You begin to open up opportunities for scientists, in this case, to engage with urban planners, artists, etc., where the uncertainty of the science, the degree of the uncertainty of the science, the consensus among scientists is irrelevant to the conversation. Because what we're dealing with here is it relevant to you? And even within science circles, this is a slide of research done on essentially assessing sort of the kinds of journals, that publish climate-related and sustainability-related articles. And if you'll see, the preponderance of them are in the environmental science, earth and planetary sciences, and you say, well, that's of course appropriate, it makes sense. But look at all of the others, even within our educated academic circles, in our professional circles, look at the degree of the missing lack of engagement with medicine, energy, engineering, social sciences, how few climate change papers and research papers are being published in those professional journals. So what we're seeking to do, and we've been working for 7 years now, hosting workshops around the world between religious leaders and science leaders, media producers and science leaders, policy, business, and religion isn't on there. That slide, I guess, fell into the database. And what we determined in the course of these workshops is that what we really are talking about, to Michelle's point, is language. Just these are the top sort of traits that define the languages of each of those sectors. So if the top vertical axis in science is the most important thing is accuracy, well, guess what? The most important thing in policy is realism, business is actionable, and media is dramatic. How do you build bridges from accuracy to drama to realism to actionability? And generally speaking, you need 3 of those traits within each of those columns in order to communicate with the other. And sometimes you'll need science and media to talk to business, etc. The other core tenet, a 2-channel communication strategy. And please note here, we're talking about our ultimate outcome and goal here is towards revising factual belief. Revising factual belief. Those words are chosen really carefully. Facts and belief in the same outcome. And essentially what we're doing is marrying science and emerging science with cultural worldviews and emerging cultural worldviews. We also are focusing on not liberal and conservative, not Democrat and Republican, but different ways that people organize themselves to which the various climate narratives and sustainability narratives can speak and find relevance. One of these that we explore is the Maslow humanistic psychology paradigm. And we marry narratives to those paradigms. People who are at the bottom of the triangle, who are at a physiological level of being, that is simply, how do I survive the next day? Narratives of global health, food and water and news is what they're most responsive to. People who are concerned about safety. Safety in my neighborhood, safety for my children, safety for my village. Narratives of resiliency, homeland security, ethics, and religion. People at the social level. Where in my social tribe do I fit? Where in my social tribe will I be if I subscribe to climate change solutions and engage in frameworks for the implementation of new governance paradigms and new research paradigms that the transformation requires? People at the level of self-esteem, people who have a certain sense of affluence and self-esteem, those are the people who respond to the discovery channel and to the business channel and the business narratives. And lastly, and I stress, lastly, at the very top of the pyramid, the people who most respond to the narrative that we have been generating for 30 years, climate, anti-climate, fighting the deniers. Accept the science. I want to persuade you about the science. The deniers are not our enemies. The deniers are our opportunities. None of this denial would take hold if we could do our job and do the same thing they're doing, which is finding relevance in our valley, finding relevance for them in climate science and climate values. So what is this really all about in terms of these bridge buildings? It's about stories, but it's not about us telling stories. It's about giving people the tools that they need to tell their own stories. The three core tenets of this new communications model is that the communication includes the facts, of course, passion, and symbols. And one of the first things we do at Yale with the students coming into the program is we play them a bunch of narratives. I'm just about to add Aretha Franklin as of last night, and say, you break it down. Where's the passion? Where's the symbol? Where's the facts? The facts are, she can do it. The passion is, she's going to do it her way. And the symbol is the unbelievable catalyzing power of diversity. All of which capture where we need to go. Other core tenet, don't blog about something, blog for someone. So what does this start to look like? Moving from, why is carbon dioxide increasing so much, and us figuring out ways to make that interesting, to, let me just run a few of these for you. How does increasing carbon dioxide impact the choices the consumer makes? How does increasing carbon dioxide impact the choices a supplier makes? Where will we run? What will we grow? Will we still get along? Will I be free? Will I be safe? Will my home still even be here? Will my wine taste the same? Will meat cost more? What will this new world look like? How much worse will the shoveling get? Science can speak to every one of those questions. A simple experiment that we hosted in Napa Valley between climate scientists and Napa Valley winemakers and judges was transformative. Oh, I'm going to then plant less Chardonnay and more Sauvignon because what these best projections ultimately show us that the new conditions are going to be more friendly to a Chardonnay versus a Sauvignon. I'm going to invest in that. The winemakers didn't even ask once about certainty. And within the great big climate change idea, these are just aspects within the climate change idea. Each one of these aspects of the climate change idea are opportunities to develop communities of knowledge. Each one of these speaks to the human fingerprints. Ocean acidification and sea ice being just one of them connects to issues of social justice, issues of public health, issues of the economy of fisheries and fishing, etc. It's not that hard to connect climate change, to make this slide as an example, to human health. People care about mortality, they care about infectious disease, they care about respiratory disease, and they care about malnutrition. So what we're talking about is essentially developing networks of folks, informed students, who have been trained in new narrative pathways in science communication, who work hard with scientists to communicate in tandem with scientists to pockets of communities based on what they want to know. And I ran a pilot for this. Got 5 more minutes of my time? Okay. I ran a pilot for this in Mozambique, which some of you may have read about and have heard about. It started with, theoretically, just going to Mozambique and teaching about climate change. That lasted about a year. Because they didn't care about climate change. You did it, you figure it out, and if you ever figure out, let us know how you did it, maybe we'll write a paper about it. Don't come here and try to into my schools and help us put together a climate change curriculum, please. So we did. I reversed course and turned to all of my partners and said, we're going to do something different. You lose and have lost over the course of the past 20 years over 75,000 lives related to typhoons. You want that to continue? No, of course not. Okay, so we're not going to talk about climate change, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the media reporters, and we are going to teach them about climate change because they in their profession want to be the ones who are educating and entertaining their audience about a very simple fact, which is these typhoons, according to your weathermen and women, are going to get worse and worse and worse, and you better start preparing. The weather makers really wanted to know. We then went to urban planners and say, do you want to prepare and mitigate against further tragedy? We'll help you and we'll work with urban signers to develop signs, which essentially do nothing more than help with rescue escape paths. You go down this road when the typhoon hits, that's what's going to happen to your truck. Urban planning. Do you guys have places that people can escape to when the typhoons hit? Because these typhoons, according to the science, are going to increase in frequency and intensity. No, we don't. We don't have the money, we don't have the power, we don't have the capacity, and we don't want you to give it to us. We don't want you to build them for us. Okay, let's engage tribal leaders and see if they have an answer. Scientists and tribal leaders came together. You know what the tribal leaders said? We got 30,000 trees, let's build tree houses. That doesn't look like much, but that tree house and the network of tree houses in Mozambique led to some of the greatest escapes and the greatest escape stories related to in climate change news and climate change history, and a very famous baby that got born in the tree and was rescued by a helicopter and was now a very famous story in 2004, 2005, and that little very famous baby has grown into this not as famous boy who now is building mangroves and running mangrove and building mangrove vegetation along the rivers to help against flooding when the typhoons hit. Each one of these sectors was hit. And each one of these sectors, we engaged scientists to seriously engage with each one of these sectors into an analysis of how best they could come to terms with the climate science. The result is that Mozambique has the highest climate change literacy percentage in the world. Climate change is taught in schools, climate change is named, but the path to that climate change commitment and that climate change education and awareness was not led by trying to persuade people that climate change was real. And so we come to what Michelle and I and NCSA and SWINS, the Science Communications with Impact Network at Yale, are building together. We're in the process of building, and with your help, we expect to execute the world's first science communication corps, which is a group of students who will be trained in communication methodologies, hubbed first at Yale, Imperial College, and 5 other partner universities. Trained first there to develop a program whereby science communication transmission can be franchised at the local, regional, and national levels. We'd like to partner with community colleges in particular, and to turn community colleges and universities into local resources where policymakers, business leaders, religious leaders, cultural influencers, economists, elected officials can turn to the Science Communication Corps to help them move, implement, and execute science-based environmental policy in a way that engages the stakeholders to whom they are accountable. And we've already begun. We're engaging with policymakers now in New Haven, Connecticut on a high-speed rail project between New Haven and New York City to reduce that journey to 45 minutes, and that won't happen without sustainability, science, and education. The Science Communication Corps will turn to policymakers, we'll turn to neighborhood mothers, we'll partner with artists, we'll partner with public health officials, We'll partner with military leaders. We have a program that we're starting right now across the military academies. We'll partner with urban planners. We'll partner with children in schools. We'll partner with farmers and enable us to move from an old model where we want and expect and persuade people to focus on the planet, to instead focus on each other. And from that blur and haze of imagination and empowerment, turn the planet into this, a network of communication and information devoted to the achievement of our climate targets and goals. And lastly, bring the Aretha effect and the benefit of the Aretha effect to the next generation that is only now.